And Joe Rogan's signature is the 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
And I've really been paying attention to that because I think it may take that long to get people to warm up at times. Mm-hmm. I look at Joe Rogan. I like watching his podcast. I've never watched 3 hours, though.
Nobody's ever watching 3 hours.
Joe Rogan, biggest podcast in the world.
Yep.
Why?
He is, his content is like, I'm not the biggest Joe Rogan fan, but
Right.
I could objectively say that he makes really, really good content. Number one, he already had access to a bunch of guests already because he was famous for other things before he came before he started his podcast. So he came in with some advantages already. But
famous guest doesn't mean great content.
But that's true,
Right.
and that's 100% a fact. Like, there's a lot of people who are famous that are terrible interviews.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are famous that are, they can't speak at all whatsoever. What has made him so good is that he is like an expert interviewer, like super good at it. Like he knows how to relate to people. He knows how to get people to say things that they wouldn't ordinarily say. Like, he's just really, really good at it. And he's had the reps at it too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd be willing to bet if you go back to some of his earlier interviews, like, it wasn't as good as it is now. Like, he's really he's a machine when it comes to interviewing. Like, the man is so good at it. It's insane.
What do you think it is? Is it his patience, or what makes him a great interviewer?
I think what makes him a great interviewer is part of, I'll cycle back to one thing I said. It's the preparation. Like, he is very, very prepared. And I think one of the other things is like, don't interview somebody that you're not actually interested in. Like,
fair.
Like, I think it's one of those things I actually stress to people. I don't care. I really don't give a shit how famous somebody is. If you don't actually care about what that person has, something that they have going on. Like, you don't have to be their best friend or idolize them or anything like that. But whatever you want to talk about with them if you don't actually care about that shit at all, don't have the interview. Like, it's only going to make for crappy content.
Right.
And it's a lose situation. It's a bad interview. Your audience isn't going to like it. You're not going to enjoy yourself. And to be honest with you, like, on a philosophical level, why are we doing this podcast? Because you enjoy doing it, right? So, like, why would you put yourself in a situation and do something you don't want to do, and then you have your guest who's going to be like, this was shitty, I don't want to do this, blah 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 blah. Like, everybody loses in that scenario. So, like, so first and foremost, he chooses people that he's actually
Generally
interested in and wants to talk to. So number one is that. Number two is not all the time, because he has had some guests that are difficult. They're not necessarily the greatest talkers,
right?
But choosing a good guest is like 90% of the battle. Like, if you have somebody that can talk and is willing to talk and willing to say things, that makes your job as an interviewer that much easier.
For sure.
And then on top of that, he's Joe Rogan. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's like I said, like, he's an expert interviewer. So, like, if you have all those three elements, you're going to be able to make great content.
Right. And when they talk in the business about talent, I be trying to figure out what that means exactly. And when I watch Joe Rogan, I'm watching like, yo, what is it about this dude? You mentioned his interviewing. I think he is very patient. I think he is an excellent listener. I think he does a great job of making people comfortable. And Joe Rogan's signature is the 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
And I've really been paying attention to that because I think it may take that long to get people to warm up at times. I look at Joe Rogan. I like watching his podcast. I've never watched 3 hours, though.
Nobody's ever watching 3 hours. Most people aren't watching 3 hours. And the reason why it's 3 hours long or 2 hours long, if I'm being completely honest, what has made his podcast at least grow so quickly on YouTube, or how it grew to be this monster on YouTube, is like, he has a whole other separate channel called like JRE Clips, right? That some people just subscribe to that.
Yes.
And the thing is, like, with those 3 hours, he's trying to get as much short form content as he can out of it. So he's trying to and also, like, even though, like, he's Joe Rogan and people are glad to be on his platform, even if they're a famous person, Joe Rogan also knows that, like, this person might be difficult to reschedule. So
Yeah.
I'm going to try to get as much time with them as I possibly can. And it's kind of, I will say it's kind of genius because it's like, I can pretty much tell him like none of that stuff, a lot of that stuff there's very minimal editing, if any at all. And he's just like, for the long form content, he's like, I'm just going to let this thing run.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is the things that most people are going to end up seeing are the short form
clips
and the short segments, because those are the things I've never sat down and watched a full or listened to a full Joe Rogan interview from front to back, like, and I'm never going to.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's not because like I dislike him so much. It's just more the fact that I'm like, I don't got 3 hours
For sure.
out of my time to do that. Like, maybe if there's somebody, he's had some pretty interesting people.
I think I listened to a full episode one time. I was on a road trip. I listened to the Dave Chappelle, but the 3 hours, and he said it one time. He said sometimes it take 3 hours to kind of bake them. You know what I'm saying? To get them to the 20-minute clip that's gonna go viral.
Yeah.
And you know, I've been trying to pull that from watching Joe Rogan, because I used to put so much pressure, like, yo, I gotta jam pack everything in this hour because people are only gonna hang around for an hour. But now I just let it ride and put a few clips out. Another thing with Joe Rogan, we talk about talent. I think establishing credibility with your audience is top. Like, people may not agree with you, but I think we all believe that he believes what he's saying.
Yeah. And I think I mean the thing is, I think I believe what he's saying too.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he comes off as a pretty genuine person, and he establishes credibility in different ways depending on who the guest is. For example, like, everybody knows he's a UFC commentator, right? So like, and the thing is, like, even before he was a UFC commentator, like, he's been known in the fight game, and people know that he's very well versed in MMA and mixed martial arts. So like, he has that credibility. So when he's speaking, at least when he's speaking about anything fight related or whatever, people know that, like, he knows what he's talking. People know that he knows what he's talking about. Yeah. But it's true, like, establishing credibility with your audience and really just, you know, being able to interact with your audience is something that's really, really key.